Welcome to Big Hearted Indy, where we empower men in Indianapolis to forge deep connections and form impactful lives through authentic friendships and service. Join us as we explore personal growth, community leadership, and the transformative power of living out our faith in action. The podcast is produced by Citizen 7, and it is hosted by Greg Enas, Don Palmer, and I am Chris Spangle. And today, our guests are Greg Enas and Mike Evans, who is the CEO of Chorus. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Great to be here.
Don is my co-interviewer today. Our subject, much like we did with Steve and Don, we wanted to take a look at one of Greg's close friendships with Mike. And Don, why don't you talk a little bit about Mike first and how you know Mike and what you think about their friendship?
Yeah. I think their friendship has a long way to go.
I was going to say, be kind, Don.
You mediate it.
They only have one struggle, they said before we started this.
That Mike and I grew up together. Mike's just a few years younger than me, but we shared North Central High School and lots of friends. But Mike is former Eli Lilly talent, and then formed his own company in the strategy and consulting space. And Greg was a former Eli Lilly talent, was a PhD biostatistician, number 2 guy in the regulatory affairs area for Lilly. And these two guys, whether it's ham and egging, encouraging each other to start Oaks Academy, or whether it's taking prison fellowship to a new level at some of the Indiana prisons, and work with the prayer breakfast in Washington, D.C. Their fingerprints are on so many things around this nation and around this state.
Don, let's get started with these guys.
Yeah.
How did you two meet? Greg?
You wanna
Okay.
go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Mike can fill in because he, as Don suggested, he is a much younger man. But my first recollection visually of Mike was meeting him. I believe it was at some kind of evening party or celebration. A mutual friend, Jim Long, was there and had brought me to this gathering. And he said, "Greg, there's a guy you got to meet." And this was probably back in mid-'80s. Definitely mid-'80s. I just forget which year it was. Said, "You got to meet Mike Evans because somehow you had met Jim Long." And you can tell that side of the story. But that's my initial recollection of how we met.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I had met Jim actually at Eli Lilly and Company. And I think you and Jim and Russ Pulliam owned a house in the near East Side or West.
Old
North
South.
Side.
Russ was our neighbor
Yep.
right behind us.
And you really kind of ministered in the inner city. And I remember going over to the house one night and just seeing how it was set up and how you just poured into the community. And that was a real formative kind of first impression. And then something I'm sure we'll touch on later is you're a yes guy. You always say yes to things. And we went on a ski trip.
This podcast.
Yeah, the Snowmass, which I'm sure we'll reference a little bit later. But that was an early memory I had of Greg Enas.
In the snow dust. I remember that.
So it does seem like that a lot of friendships are based upon kind of common joys, common hobbies, things that you enjoy doing regardless of whether someone else was there or not. What do you think were the activities or the passions? You know, everyone meets lots of different people. Why was there chemistry between the two of you?
You know, Don, Mike and I, he mentioned skiing. I am not a skier, but he had been skiing many more times and had friends out there, not mutual friends, but friends that allowed him to do that. But I think ultimately what it was when we started going to the same church together. I married Kim. Kim and I were married at East 91st Street Christian Church, and Mike can tell that side of the story. But I saw his family, his young boys. I knew him going at Post Lilly with the Dodson Group and then into Chorus. And all of that inspired me. But on top of all those ventures, Mike gave his heart and life and soul to encourage me and to bless me from the get-go. And that really sealed the deal because I had not met anyone like that who is so unselfish, so kind, so thoughtful, so hospitable in my life. That's my recollection.
Mike?
Yeah, it's interesting. I echo that back. Greg has always had a quality as a friend of championing you or championing the other person. And his life is marked by the quality of not wanting accolades himself, but always wanting to see the other person succeed. And I think there's been a real synergy between our friendship where 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, it equals 3, 4, 5. Because of always trying to find ways of investing in the other person so they can have a greater impact in all the things they're involved with.
So let's pause there. And you're talking about champion and then having a synergy. Give us an example of what championing looks like, and then maybe, what this 1 + 1 = 3 looks like.
Yeah, well, back at East 91st Street, Christian Church, Greg headed up. Our church really wanted to have an involvement in the inner city. And instead of just marching down to the inner city, acting like we know what's going on, really realizing that we don't, and we need others who live in that environment to really say how we can get involved. And Greg called me up one day because I was involved with a program started by Steve Goldsmith called the African American Male Commission. And he said, we're hiring a guy named Tim Street who's going to head up some kind of ministry in the inner city, and I really want him to start to meet some people. And you said, can you introduce him to some folks that were involved with the African American Male Commission? And I did, and that led to some kind of cool things. A great example of just how you pull others into your world to impact the world around you.
So, Greg, were you living in a house downtown, like with roommates, or did you own a house? What was the setup when he first met you? You're living with 2 other guys, or
So Jim Long and I were serving Percy Scruggs at the Community Outreach Center at 23rd and Guilford. And Russ Pulliam had enrolled Jim in serving there. And Jim and I had this vision to actually live down near where the boys that we were mentoring lived. Not only to provide them jobs as sweat equity into our old home that we were seeking to restore, but also to give us proximity to them so that we could live with them and be with them as much as possible. And so with that, we had this big house, two owners. Jim and I owned it 50-50, and we invited others in with this quid. We said, we will give you below market rate to live with us if you serve with us at the Community Outreach Center. And we had a number of people come through. I think we had about 15 guys over the 3.5, almost 4 years I was there actually live with us for an extended period of time. And anyone from a medical student at the local IU med school to blue-collar workers. Our couch was often available for people just flopping there off the street, literally sometimes. We had one guy I remember who just came in off the street and was struggling with alcohol and lived on our couch for a while. But that's really what we had, and then that's the house that Mike visited, and that led to a number of other relationships and institutions that we were able to found there. But Gyra Sports is what Mike is referring to, under the auspices of East 91st Street Christian Church. And I was asked to sort of help lead that initiative because they knew of my life and heart for inner city Indianapolis.
So, Greg, as you look at things, how would you respond to how Mike helps champion you? And what do you see as the synergies that they may in your work with Oaks or some other ministry that you feel like Mike's been additive to?
Well, I'll just piggyback on what Mike said and what I already said. Mike has always put me above his needs. He has blessed me and my family, thoughtful, whether it be a little gift or a little happy birthday wish, or taking my kids under his wing as a mentor, or loving my family as far as who we are as the Enas family. He has brought me into his world, and not only his family, but now I'm the vice chair of his board at Chorus, and That's been a thrilling experience. He has brought me in, and he has done things for me beyond the call of duty. I remember, Mike, actually, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you hired some kind of limousine for me one day.
Good memory.
Yeah, and I don't think I'd been in a limousine before, but out of the blue, you went above the call of duty to make my day so special that way. And that's just one bookend for 100 different ways that Mike has made my life special.
Well, I got to chime in on that one because that was actually for your wedding anniversary. And I got a conference call. This is back when I think conference call may have just been invented, which kind of dates myself a little bit. I got your boys, all three of your boys were on a call with me, and we were strategizing how we can put together a special evening for you and your bride for your anniversary. And so the limousine was part of that. And I think we had a chef come to your house and cook dinner. And
That's right.
And I think you had the men serving. So
Where did that, let's jump back to your childhood or development, Mike. Where did that spirit of hospitality and generosity develop within you?
yeah, boy, great question. I'd have to tie that back to both my parents. Both my mother and father were incredible givers to others, and not only looking within the family, but always looking outside how they could serve other people. And my mother was the daughter of 2 Romanian immigrants, and cooking was super important. So she always had food for us, which is probably exemplary of an expanding waistline. And my late father passed away about 20 years ago, just always invested in others, and especially in next generation folks. He was relentless in wanting to see kids advanced and always had a heart for service.
Don?
We all have golf friends and, pickleball friends, but that, sometimes a deeper friendship is where you're carrying each other's burdens. And I'm interested to know how you've supported each other during some of the lower points of your life.
Well, I'd like to take a stab at that first. First of all, I have to say that Mike and I not only have been friends as men and as brothers, but our wives have been friends, and we have been together in that life group now for well over 20 years, 25 years. And that has solidified our own personal relationship to have our wives and 3 other couples involved in a almost covenantal kind of relationship, sharing death, sharing life, sharing marriage together. So Don, to your question, that level of friendship between couples and between kids, but mostly between couples, has enhanced our vulnerability with each other. We are able in both arenas, both as individuals and as couples, to share the deepest, darkest moments with each other. So in my family situation with a number of different health issues with members of my family, Mike and Sherry have just been sounding boards, prayer warriors. How can we really help? Not just, hey, can I help, as a perfunctory kind of thing with a smile, but really coming alongside and helping us. So I just can't say enough about that depth of friendship.
I'd echo that. I think when you're able to walk through life kind of in totality, with spouses, with kids, life experiences, church, going through your faith and family and friends and just exploring all aspects of life and being able to go through the ups and downs and together, and you've got that longevity, that has spanned almost 4 decades. That takes it to a whole new level.
Yeah. So this whole life group concept, we sometimes hear about Bible studies or small groups. I'm somebody listening to this, and I'd like to have maybe more intentional relationships with some couples. How would I start that, or what were the key elements, and not to overthink it?
And let me ask a clarifying
Yeah.
question. What you're talking about is different than like the fruitful walk relationship, the male covenant.
Oh, yeah.
You have one with your wives. You have 2 separate
We have
circles.
multiple intersecting circles. So Don, Yes, life group. Dear Don Ball, Don and Judy Ball at East 91st Street Christian Church had a Sunday school class for young adults called Dunamis. And we and these other couples connected there. And it's within that class that we started to get to know one another, showing up every Sunday, being with each other. And then I forget how it actually forged, but we just had already loved each other and done things together, had fun together, right? That's the operative word, fun, that we just said, hey, let's start meeting regularly together as a group. And so that's
What was that rhythm of meeting together? What did you do? Did you just go over to each other's house? Did you go out and do activities? Like, at what pace?
initially it was monthly, every 2 weeks. I'm not sure exactly what it was initially, but it was Bible study, book study, having fun activities together, going to each other's kids' weddings and going to funerals. But the regular cadence was meeting in a house. And I will tell you, the food was great. The food and drink was really good. That kept us going.
So would it start with, a meal together and then transition into some sort of study?
That's right.
Pretty much everything revolves around food. Yeah, Dave.
We resemble that comment.
We need to start catering these.
It is true. I think it started around Bible study, which is obviously something that we all share in common. But then it went beyond that, just in doing life together. And I think when we talk about fruitful walk, that'll be a common theme as well. A lot of times we feel like we've got to have all this organization and structure, and it's helpful to have some structure to provide a framework. But just being able to experience life together, the ups and the downs, I have found to be really rich. And that's when you really start to get to know people at a new level. And then your acts of service, which I think motivates all of us here, becomes such a central part of that, but it comes out of those relationships.
So, if I may, to his question about sharing each other's burdens, I think a lot of times people are not willing to call and say, I need help, especially men. Maybe somebody will trip upon the information and give you a call, but Greg, if you had something happen in your life, would you intentionally call and say, X, Y, Z, and just happened, I need to meet with you? Or, when those burdens come up, what does that conversation look like?
We share prayer requests and burdens amongst the group. So yes, back when there was only phone, we would pick up the phone, but with email, with text, with all that, we use all those venues in person when we're getting together to share. And we probe, we ask how each other's doing, and we don't expect a BS smile. We expect, a real answer about what's going on. And then we actively track our prayer request and sharing with each other.
I remember.
Maybe if we could switch gears.
I want to share one more story on that, though, because I tie back to just the value Greg's had in my relationship. I remember early on in my marriage, after we had kids, life was just filled with all sorts of activity, building a business. My father had been running for public office, just trying to serve my wife, my kids. And I remember being so depleted one day. I called Greg, and Greg had a busy life. As Don already mentioned, he was a top executive at Lilly and just had so much demands on his time. But one thing about Greg is when I call him, if I've got something I need to talk to him about, he'll drop everything else and really focus on that. And I remember going over, and we spent, I would say it was almost 3-hour lunch. Now, he did not do that. John Licklider, he did not do that on the clock. I just have to know that. He always made up the time. I want to know that. But I remember saying, hey, I need to pour my heart out to you and just talk to you about things that are going on in my life. And I said, I want you to preach back to me. I'm going to tell you these things. I just want you to talk. And so I'm taking notes. I probably had 5 or 6 pages of notes. And then at the end of lunch, as busy as he was, I said, I hate to ask this, but could you take my notes and just try to write some scripture that I could kind of meditate on? And I said, take a couple weeks. In less than 24 hours, I had all 5 or 6 pages back with scripture. And I tell you, I point back in my mind to that moment so many times, and how that not only made a difference in my life, but really symbolized the depth of our friendship.
Thank you. So it seems like the world's moving faster and faster, and they say people getting out of college now will have 10 or 11 different jobs.
Mm-hmm.
This is different than our generation. So you left Lilly and took the leap of going out on your own to start a strategy and consulting business. Tell us about, take us back to that time. What was that like? Um, how did you garner up the courage to do it? Um, Tell us a little about
Yeah.
that.
No, thank you. Well, one is, Don, to pull you into this for a little bit. You and I share a common mentor in the late Dr. Bill Haberly, who was, when he passed away, all the media kind of referenced as the father of entrepreneurship in the state of Indiana. And Dr. Haberly really implanted in my mind and life experiences early on in college the idea of entrepreneurism or entrepreneurism. And I was fortunate after I left Lilly to join three of my best friends at the time, Jim Dodson and Jay Gachet and Tom Jackson, to form a company and learn so much from those guys. And we still stay in relationship even today. Sold my interest in the company in 96 and then started Chorus in 97. And if I hadn't had both, the formative experience of Eli Lilly and Company and having worked with General Motors, but also what I learned working with three young colleagues building a business together, probably wouldn't have been able to do what I was able to do, and wouldn't have had kind of the vision in my head if Dr. Haberly hadn't planted that seed of entrepreneurism. So I think all those different life experiences, it's interesting how God kind of blends all that together to enable you to do things maybe that you otherwise would never have imagined doing.
So seeking a mentor or having someone who has advised other people in these kind of transitions was critical to your journey.
I really think it is. Obviously in our line of work, we think executive coaching is important and professional development is important and getting others an opportunity, maybe who doesn't have a dog in the hunt, to help you strategically work through things. But there's something about mentorship where there's not a quid pro quo. There's not any kind of expectation back. You just want to pour into someone else's life and learn from them, maybe at a different season of life. I mean, I've had mentors that are much, much older than me, like a Dr. Haberly, but I've also had reverse mentors. Even in my business, a few years ago, hired a young man and young woman under the age of 25 to be able to mentor me cross-generationally. And that really also had an impact in my life.
Mhm. So seeking both reverse mentor, have the humility to say, hey, there's some younger people that got some things figured out or have a different filter, but then also maybe people that are older as well.
Exactly. It probably started with the feedback from my kids that, Dad, you don't know how to dress in a professional environment. You really need to be a little bit more laid back.
So you've been involved a lot with um, coaching executives, assessing talent, helping people develop leadership development plans. As you look at that 30-some year career in that, are there a couple, key takeaways or maybe blind spots that as people are listening to this to say, if you really want to get better or you want to uh, make a better contribution in your vocation, well, what would you say?
Well, that's a good question too, Don. It's interesting. A lot of times people would immediately go to the technical aspect of whatever they're doing, whether it be in business or even a physician, right? Um, but over the years, and I think a lot of the mentors that have poured into my life and others that have poured into my life have said it's really the non-technical things oftentimes. It's the ability to develop relationships with others. It's the ability and the prioritization of having relentless trust with someone else, being able to be vulnerable and not knowing it all. I think it's that personal culture of humility and being able to give of yourself and allow others to pour into you are some of the things that I have found to be most beneficial. And, when we talk with young up and coming executives, one of the things we try to emphasize is don't go into a situation feeling like you have to know it all. If you can go in and just engage others and look at them as they're more important than you, oftentimes that's going to create the kind of environment, that people are going to enjoy, that they're going to give more of themselves to, and the end game's going to be a lot more beneficial for everybody.
So, Greg, you're a PhD biostatistician. You're up to your eyeballs in work and getting drugs approved through the federal government.
Legal ones.
And then somehow the finest educational, faith-based school starts, and you are at the forefront of that. Take us back to how in the world I have a hard time finding a couple hours for service every week. How did you find time? How did you balance the demands of your career with your passion and your interest in starting the Oaks Academy?
First of all, I have to admit I've made many mistakes along the way. And because my family is the most important relational body that I dwell and live my life in, I believe many times, especially with my wife, that my activities outside of my family have taken my attention and taken my time away from her, time that was justifiably desired and wanted. And in fact, I remember, Don, at one point early, the strain in our marriage was so great that I had to take the deliberate action and say no to 13 different initiatives that I had been a part of. And I will say along the way, Mike and our friendship and our life group and others, were supporting me in that. But here as I sit and answer that question, Don, it's been a hard journey for me with my attention deficit disorder, the way I'm easily distracted. So with that, it goes back to how I really view how we were made to live life. And that is first with your family. We all have parents. So even those that are unmarried, guys that are listening that are not married, they were in a family if they don't have a family now. And making sure those relationships are as good as you can create and as good as you can mold and cultivate them. And then it's out of the family that I've been able to do these things, first and foremost at Lilly for almost 30 years and then beyond, but not doing it independent of my family, but always having my family as the lens and the energizer that will catapult me into these other things. Being frank with my wife about the Oaks Academy, about why this lawyer is showing up at our doorstep at 6 a.m. in the morning, because she's involved. And so having to learn to be honest and open, and it's through my family and then through my church. Like Mike and I mentioned the East 91st Street Foundation for Gyra Sports, but it was through that. So it's not independent, 1 + 1 + 1, keep adding these things. And when I said no to 13, that's what I'd been doing. But what I've learned now is that it's more like concentric circles where you and your family are at the middle, at the center, and then the overflow of that is into your community of faith, into your city, the institutions that you're involved with, and then beyond. So I hope that sort of describes pictorially how I've been able to do a lot. I will say too, finally, Don, that in my wife's life, she has, had a lot of physical pain and has not been able to do as much as we want to together. And I will say that death of various dreams has led to doors opening to new dreams and vista along our path.
Wow, that's saying a lot. So you talked about trying to integrate family into service or into that lens of looking at things. Maybe Mike and Greg, could you give us some example, maybe some family habits, family rituals that you think have been enhances your family's life?
I'll take a stab at that. Like Greg, I've been blessed with a family that definitely has enabled me to become all I can be, or at least striving to be all I can be. My wife and I have been married for think around 38 years. I should know the exact time. Sorry, honey, if you're listening to this podcast later.
I know it's less than me at 38, so you're in good shape.
But definitely blessed with a wife. I did marry over my head, but a wife who really wants me to have a strong faith and to prioritize family. My wife had a challenged upbringing growing up, and it also has had some health challenges along the way, and that has really spurred her on to try to serve others. So late in life, as a person who has kept up her pharmacy license, she went back and got her master's in adult mental counseling, is now an official counselor, having just gotten the final license just a few days ago.
Full-time counseling you to
Yeah.
start.
Well, I think that's why she went into it. It was a little subversive bad. But then, we've been blessed with two boys too, who have made their faith a central part of their life, and have definitely pursued careers that have enabled them to serve others, and we're excited about that. But it's also enabled us as a family to serve together. And so one of the areas that we serve, that I know, Don, you and Greg have also deeply been involved with, is Shepherd Community. And by being a part of Shepherd Community, and reading to others, working on an inner city basketball camp that our family started many years ago, all those acts of service give you something to do as a family while you're also serving others. And it just has a way of blessing you. When you're trying to bless others, you end up getting more blessed yourself by doing the service together.
That's beautiful. And Mike, you and your family have been role models for me and my family, how intentional you've been with your boys, with Sherry, doing things together. Given our physical challenges and constraints in our home, we haven't been able to do as much, but I've always looked up to you that way. And I know my boys and Kim likewise have done that. So with me and my family, early on, my boys will give me grief for some of the things I tried to do with them that they thought were so hokey, or things that they don't want to, really remember because they were fun, but they were really hokey. I'm sort of a hokey kind of guy.
Give us an example of that.
Well, so we would have time together singing and studying the Bible and other books when they were young. And we'd call that family devotions, and we'd try to do it in the evening. But some of the books that I got for them were too kiddish or too off-putting, and they were more sophisticated than what I was bringing to them. That sometimes when they'll try to jab me, they'll say, "Hey, Dad, what about that book?" or "What about that going on?" So it's just that kind of stuff. But I am thankful we tried to have family time together in the evening, studying God's Word. We would sing, and that was a little hokey at times too, because I love to sing, and the boys, saying, "Come on, Dad, where are you?" But it was being intentional, at least early on, that really, I think, was something we'll look back with fondness.
Yeah. So I've got an intellectual 6-year-old myself, and there is that gap, right?
That's right.
But we think a lot about how can we show our kids, 6, 1 on the way, how to do service, right? We aren't plugged into a charity. My wife just started an Embrace Grace group, which has been fantastic for our family. But for us folks with young families, like, how did you get your kids involved, and at what ages? How did you know what was appropriate for service, but trying to give them that heart that you grew up with to invest in the next generation? Like, how did you get your families started in that?
Everything from, when we started the Oaks Academy, we bought this old IPS, Indianapolis Public School building. And I remember bringing my boys down, and we were scrubbing stuff off the walls. We were getting it ready for painting and cleaning it up. And it was, as Don and Mike know, it was quite a junk pile in many cases. Great bones and structure to it, but just looking at places to get them involved, not too far above their capacity, but they could scrub.
Yeah.
They could work in doing manual labor, and then later on having more, intellectual kinds of things. But to start them with what's appropriate for them.
Yeah.
I remember back to Shepherd Community, I remember Jay Height. We went out to lunch with the pastor at the time from our church and with Jay, and I asked Jay, I said, "Jay, what do you need?" And he said, one of the biggest needs we have is we need a basketball camp. This is back in the day. And so I contacted Ray Tolbert, who is a friend of mine, former star at IU and played professional basketball, and said, hey, will you lead a camp if we can kind of start all the other stuff around it? And he said, absolutely. So we found some people in the community who just had a deep love for others, who were willing to donate a large number of pairs of shoes, and we got people to donate clothes and all sorts of things. And we had our kids with my wife go and measure kids' feet size in the inner city with Shepherd. That was their first act of service. And then as we got all these goods pulled together, we would have these packing nights where we'd get backpacks and we take all this stuff, write letters to the kids, and they were just doing things manually that other kids were going to be able to enjoy. And that's where it started. And it just kind of pulled in deeper and deeper so they could, again, see the needs within the community and then in their own kind of little way, be able to meet those needs.
And later, as the boys got older, like you pulled my son Doug in as the first high school intern into your company. You pulled my son Chris as the first college intern in your company. So it goes both ways. As you grow, you get to know one another, and you can start to develop intergenerational friendships, which I found so powerful.
So maybe I don't have quite as deep or as broad of authentic friendships, a friendship as you. And I'm listening to this. What advice would you give to somebody that says, hey, I'm starting at a pretty low level. What advice would you give them if they came to you and said, hey, long term, that's what I'd like to do?
My first thing is I would start small. I think sometimes we have these grandiose thoughts that it's got to be really big before we even start doing something. And I think starting small is key. So even one friendship, one relationship, trying to keep your eyes open of what are some needs around you or someone maybe who needs to be befriended. And can I just extend myself and, have a cup of coffee with them, or in my case, a Diet Coke from McDonald's, and just sit and just kind of talk about life. I think one of the things that has been really enriching for me, and I think it was probably implanted in me at a young age, is just keep your eyes open and look around for the needs of others. And I don't want that to sound like over braggadocious, oh, how great I am, because it's not. It's really just being aware.
Don, I have two answers to your question. One, for guys that are not married, I would say rally around a shared passion or interest, whether it be playing hoops together or serving on mission in the city together. And, we try to inculcate that with Citizen 7. For those that are married, and this is where Mike and I have been able to take our friendship, I think, to another level, is that my wife adores Mike Evans, and I adore Sherry. I mean, we have developed such close relationships. So for married individuals, I would say include your spouse in developing that little small friendship and see where it goes, as the Evans and Enases did in the Dunamis class. And that bond as couples really has led to a lot of what we're talking about here.
In service. I'm going to underscore service too. And,
Right.
and I think the more we can serve others, and again, just serving in simple ways, those start to build on each other.
So we've talked a lot about friendship. We've talked about service. Sometimes it's like, you know what? I feel like I got a to-do list that never ends. Burnout, whether we're in not-for-profit or we're in a for-profit, corporate or small business, what advice would you give to keep fresh, to be rejuvenated? What gives you joy, or what would you recommend to folk so that they can avoid that peril of being burnt out?
Yeah, it's interesting. I learned a lot from a guy that's been in my life for a number of years named Jay Gachet, who I know both of you know well. Jay was in my wedding, and we worked together at my former company and worked together again at Chorus. And one of the things that he really influenced me on was the importance of focusing on always making a difference. And even though we'd be so busy with work or other life challenges, he always said, "Hey, we always have time to serve." And I think the two of you exemplify that in your own lives as well. And I think by trying to make a difference, even when life is crazy, it tends to take the attention off ourselves and our life's challenges, and it just makes life work a lot better.
I believe my life outside of Lilly made me a better employee at Eli Lilly. I can guarantee that. It gave me that diverse perspective from outside the Lilly R&D engine and the commercial engine. It gave me so many things, friendships, connections, and helped me with my work. So I think there's a synergy back and forth. Now, I also have to say is that I rose in my career. The time constraints for Lilly did demand more. And I had to, like I said, eliminate 13 things off my to-do list. So there are ways you have to reallocate your time, but both are important to Mike's point. And without that notion of living within your community, loving your neighbor as you love yourself outside of your work, I think diminishes you in every way and diminishes your work.
If I can give a personal example, I mean, the last year working at Bob and Tom, sitting in the room when things came up, I would say, oh, I know somebody that I met at C7 events, or I have a connection here that we have a problem and I know who I can get to that could get us to that person. Like it made me a better employee, you know, at the end of the day. Like, and that's a very direct example from just going to C7 breakfast 5 times this year.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting in a lot of my formative season of life at Eli Lilly and Company. I had a manager named John Weiss, and John was big on drawing circles of your personal life, your family life, your spiritual life, your work life, your community service, and all those circles needed to intersect and needed to have kind of a healthy balance, but they all worked together. And, you know, I was raised in a family where work was lifted up. It was important to work hard and to enjoy what you did. And I think sometimes people can look at that and almost see that as a negative. I don't think that's the case at all. I think taking each of those circles and really being intentional in each of those circles and having them work well together is a real key, a key to success in life.
Well, I'm personally inspired by hearing your story. Interesting how the good Lord puts people in our lives and enriches our lives. Hopefully, iron sharpen iron, so does one man's countenance sharpen that of another. And certainly it seems like that's been the case with you, and how both your family and your professional life and your faith life have intersected. And really thank you so much for being a great friend to me. We won't have time to go into what a fruitful walk is, but Greg and
Disappointed.
Absolutely.
6 of us
Love you.
We'll have to do a part 2.
have walked alongside each other for 15 some years. And,
Yes.
and one of the components of that has been fun, being intentional about how can we have fun together in addition to sharing our lives on a authentic basis. So maybe, Chris, you think it's time to open it up for questions?
Well, if you have any questions, please leave us a question in the chat. If you're watching live on Zoom, Alex, Chris, Ethan, please get in the chat there and leave us a question. You can watch us live on the 4th Monday of every month through Zoom. You can join heartbeat.chat to get that link right now at citizen7indy.com. And you can sign up for the email list, see events, see the great profiles. While we're waiting for a question, Greg, these profiles that you put out every month about a Citizen 7 member, those are fantastic.
I have to give credit to Mike. Mike's writer, Amy Clemens, writes those up for us. And so thanks again, our friendship, Don, really coming alongside and saying, yes, this is something worth doing, of course, with Don and my friendship, then Mike saying, here's the writer that you need to make that happen. So it's been a blessing. And I've gotten so many comments, positive comments about doing that. And Don and I hope to take that to the next level in the year ahead, to take written profiles and manifest them and amplify them in ways that will really hopefully blow people's minds.
What event in 2025 have you talked about that maybe on the books? Can you give us a little preview of what you two want to do in 2025 with Citizen 7?
Well, Don, please chime in here. But our first rule of order is Don and I are committed to next generation leadership and amplifying next generation energy in our city. It needs it so much. And so we're committed right now to laying that foundation through capital investment, through hiring, intentional work to get done, and for bringing in the next gen to sort of lead what we want to do in the community through our events and social activities, through content and education, but then convert that into real impactful service here in Indianapolis. So we're getting that infrastructure laid out right now, and then events and other things, tactics will follow from that strategy. Don, anything to add to that?
I think one thing we really want Citizen 7 to become not just an organization, but really a movement. And so we're talking to folk that have started movements and trying to get input from them on that. So we plan to increase the amount of administrative help that we have so that we can execute. We've developed a playbook, and a lot, as Greg says, will be really us kind of stepping aside and handing the reins off to what a dense network of friends around central Indiana would look like, what does service look like, and how can you have a lot of joy. We want to save the world. We want to have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's right.
The breakfasts are always fun. I learned a ton from Todd Houston and about Indiana. And the fun part is seeing people that I go to church with that I didn't know I went to church with at Citizen 7 events. And then we point at each other and go, wait a minute, you look familiar. And so, I don't know, it's been a great year. This is kind of the first year that I waded into Citizen 7. And this has been a great opportunity for me to do this with you both. And the friendships that I've been able to make and all of it has been fantastic. So love what you guys are doing. I know all of you watching also love what they're doing. So please take these podcasts, share it. When there's an event coming up, share it with your network. Taking not only the podcast, but the website, citizen7indy.com. That's the number 7. That would be incredibly helpful for Citizen 7, Greg, Don, and everybody involved to spread the word about it. Ask them to sign up for the emails. Ask them to sign up for heartbeat.chat and get connected with other folks. And Kevin says that Citizen 7 has inspired a great deal of my life. So thank you to both of you as we end this year for what you've built and the network that you're building out with folks to inspire them. And these podcasts, every month I got to find like 4 or 5 guys. I'm not hitting that mark when it comes to covenantal friendships in my own life. And so I appreciate it. Thank you both.
Well, I have to close this conversation by saying these are 2 of my closest friends, and I don't have many with Don and Mike. And since this focus today has been on Mike and me, and with you guys facilitating this, I do have to tell you, Mike, that it's been so beautiful for me to say honestly and to learn through these decades of friendship that I love you, Michael Evans, and I'll love you forever.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Greg. I love you too. And I tell you, one of the great testimonies, I think, to that is what our kids see. And I had asked my boys and my wife just to jot down some quick thoughts of what they observe in our friendship. And it's interesting, one of my sons had a whole list of things, but one of the things that he pointed me to was a scripture that I want to read, Psalm 34:3, glorify the Lord with me, let us exalt his name together. And I have thoroughly loved exalting his name together with you. and also with you too, Don. It's been a real blessing, and I'm excited for what lies ahead.
Man.
All right, with that, we say thank you for watching. Please share this if you got something out of it. I know you did, like I did. Thank you to Greg and Don and Mike for being on this episode, and thank you for watching. We'll see you again in 2025 here on Big Hearted Indy.